Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed our previous episode with Mr. Michael Dare. Definitely a cool, almost Forrest Gump-like story there. And just for reference, he was talking about that movie about his life. And I actually got some confirmation from those of you who listen, somebody who you might be familiar with, Mr. Whitey. He talked about how I talked to him, he actually watched that movie. So for Michael there, we were able to confirm that, it is a cool movie and it actually happened. So I'm looking forward at some point to following up with that. But we're back today with a brand new guest, and I'm really interested to talk to him because there's a lot of meat on the bone there as well. I want to welcome to the podcast for the very first time, Mr. William Tucker. How are you doing, William?
Very good, and thank you so much for having me on.
Definitely. I wanted to actually check in. Where are you joining us from right now?
Right this second, I'm joining you from Albania. I just flew here, 5 days ago.
Wow. See, and that's the interesting part about this podcast. I've had the opportunity to talk to people from all over the world, and so that's kind of crazy how in this day and age, you can just jump on a Zoom call and talk to people from all over the world. So that part to me is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the world has become small, with technology, and we're now able to reach people, just about anywhere at any time.
Definitely. And so, when it comes to reaching people all over the world and everything, that really ties into what you're all about, and I wanted to kind of just really jump into your story and get to it. And, where are you originally from and how did you get to where you are now? I know we're going to touch on education and everything, but everybody has their story, and I just kind of want to give like a quick frame to what we're about to talk about, and just give us a little bit of background.
All right. Well, better take notes because I'm not the usual background. My father is American. My mother is Swedish. I was born in Belgium, raised in Holland, Denmark, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the US. I've lived in Oregon, Los Angeles, Missouri, and Florida. Aside from that, I've done a hell of a lot of traveling. Really just, to expand my horizons, and get to know people around the world. I've always, wanted to know more about other people. All right. Many people, they grow up and live in one location or a few. And where there's nothing wrong with that, your viewpoint, I feel, remains limited until you get the opportunity or chance to really get to meet other people from other places, and find out what their problems and issues are, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And the most interesting part about that is that people around the world have the exact same issues, no matter where you go, right? People are people. They're wonderful. And I find them to be just fantastic, friendly people wherever I go.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of been around the world, done your thing, and seen it all. And I really wanted to talk about your story. How you kind of you gave up everything, right, to go and help people in a certain part of the world. And talk to us about that.
Okay, yeah. I'll start about that. I was happily, living my life. Everything going well, financially secure. I'm not saying super rich, but I had a house. Everything you want, right, and a good job. But I wasn't satisfied. Right, it was really not getting any personal fulfillment out of this, right? And having traveled, like my grandmother was one of the first female sociologists in Sweden, and as a 14-year-old, she actually took me out to Africa uh, to show me, what the world was really like and how other people lived, and that not everything was well or equal. So I really owe a debt to her, because that opened my eyes, right? All of a sudden, you're in a place where kids your age have nothing, right? And to be honest, I was in shock at first, as a 14-year-old. But I definitely realized there was more to life than just, being well off yourself and being happy yourself. Anyway, I'd gotten to a point where I was doing well, but I just really looking and knowing how kids and people around the world in other places have nothing, right? And don't even have the opportunity to get out of the situation they're in. Bothered me, okay? And then, in 2015, the Syrian war happened, and, a crisis started. And my wife happened to be traveling in the Balkans and ran across a stream of refugees, okay? And this was in northern Macedonia. And she saw all these kids arriving in shorts and t-shirts fleeing from war, yet it was an Arctic zone, okay? So at that point, she dropped everything and said, I'm doing something about this. And that's really the start of like the shift over, right? Of we've got it all good, to like, okay, there are people in need. So she started a project called Winter Clothes for Refugees. Oh, and I think she helped, together we helped about 100,000 people, over a 6-month time period, and this was just so fulfilling, right? And it really opened my eyes even more, because here we were working with other volunteers. We had our own volunteer unit. We were fundraising, put a lot of money myself, but there was Muslims, Christians, Jews, and everybody was working together.
Wow.
Right? To help these children, right?
This sounds that sounds almost like a John Lennon song waiting to happen there.
I know, right? And this really impressed me, right? Because you could really see, that people are good, right? And there's a lot more good people than greedy people, okay? And when we were helping these refugees, it was really interesting, because our Muslim volunteers went out of their way to give special respect to any of the Christian or Jewish refugees, because it was all sorts, right? Because they knew they were a minority and had a harder time, right? But there was just like religion wasn't the thing. Everybody had their own religion, or weren't, it didn't matter, right? So this kind of like sense of community, harmony, and like really caring for others, right? It became obvious that a lot of that exists. Plus, on top of that, when you help a child, right, and they come in crying, freezing cold, and you warm them up, the gratitude you get from a child, even if it's just a smile, right, or a look of relief, oh my God, right? There's no money in the world that can pay for that memory, or for that return kindness. So that kind of like, opened my eyes, right? And then, after 6 months, it kind of calmed down. So, I went back to work, and I was like, okay, work now was no longer satisfying at all. Right?
That kind of speaks to like almost, I don't know if you know the story of like Siddhartha,
Yes.
And that kind of speaks to like human nature there, right? Where again, you mentioned, you weren't like necessarily royalty or anything like that, like Siddhartha, but you had a comfortable living and everything like that, and you weren't feeling fulfilled, and now you were exposed to all of this other stuff in the world, right? and you
Yeah.
felt a calling, and I think a lot of people can really relate to that, where like they finally open their eyes to what's going on sometimes, and it's like, I need to do something about this. Because people like to have a cause. They like to, like you mentioned, there's so many more good people than bad people out there, and people want to help each other out, right? So, continuing with your story, you're talking about now having your eyes open, right, and really seeing that it's time to help people out, right? So take it from there.
Good. And by the way, what you said is spot on. You know what I mean? It's like you get your calling. People like to help, and when you're faced with the real situations, then your eyes get open. Anyway, so we continued with emergency relief for children. Started various other projects, around the world. But then one of the things we noticed is, our friends in the volunteer community. On emergency relief line, you see a lot of burnout eventually. Okay, people will be really excited to start with, and then they start to help, and they help, and they help, and they help. But somehow the situation never ends. One war finishes, a new one starts, right? And people then, kind of get the idea that they're failing because nothing is changing. Right? And this failed help, and they're not failing, they're helping every day, right? But it just feels that way, and they get this burnout. So we really started looking, okay, but why are all these problems occurring, right? Why all this misery? Why when one war finishes, does a new one start right away? Like what's the underlying cause to all this conflict? Right? A lot of people will give you different answers. They'll say, well, there's people who don't have anything and people who have a lot, right? And it's greed. And I'm not saying those are not contributing factors, right? But, to me, it's like the common man on the street, the normal guy, the small guy, right? The family person. None of those want to go to war, None of the normal people want to have anything to do with war, right?
Right.
So it's like, but how come we always in the middle of this then, right? So because the average person doesn't want it. There's only a select few that seem to get off on this. Okay, so we started going, okay, well, there must be, an underlying educational issue, right? Because even, when people are educated properly, when they can think for themselves, they make better choices, and I don't want to tell anybody what's right? I don't want to tell anybody how to think. I believe that a person should think for himself, right? I don't even need anybody to agree with me, right? As long as your thoughts are your own thoughts, and not some blind copying of somebody's slogan, right?
Yeah.
So then we started going to we decided to go to some of the worst slums in the world, and ended up in South Africa, in a little slum near Johannesburg called Etwatwa. Okay, and Etwatwa is a Zulu word. It means machine gun fire. So. This should give you an idea, of the type of place this is, right? Police do not enter there. South African government does not enter there. In actual fact, people who live in Soweto will not step foot in Etwatwa, right? It's considered a no-go zone. Yeah. So my wife and I said, okay, that's where we're going, right? Because that's where we're going to find some answers.
So you're just like, nobody wants to go there. You know what, honey? Let's go.
Let's go, right? And even more so my wife, right? She's this petite, beautiful little thing. Watch out, right? Yeah. Because she is afraid of nothing. And, when it comes to kids, she makes sure they're safe no matter what, right?
Nice.
So, that's so we decided to go in there and see, okay, what is the real deal? So that was interesting. Uh, found a local contact, got, to a trottoir and actually loaded up a car full of oranges so I could give all the kids a healthy treat, right? As the first action, kind of as like, okay, guys, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just here to help, but to really demonstrate it, right? So we drove in there, stopped the car, opened the boot or the back of the car, started handing out oranges to kids. Within 15 minutes, we had every kid in the slum there, getting their orange. And I'm telling you, I've never met kids with such good manners. This shocked me. Okay, they stood in line, and every kid that I or my wife, handed an orange, gracefully accepted it and said thank you, right? Whether in English or Zulu, right? Unbelievable, right? Nothing like in the West, right? And these kids were hungry. You follow? You would think that they have more reason to demand, right?
Right, and just based on the reputation of that area, you would probably be thinking like, oh, they're probably like savages over there, right? But they definitely showed you that they weren't, with their manners and everything.
Absolutely, right. And that's one of the things that traveling gets to you. You go to places, and we all have preconceived ideas. It's human nature, right? We think it's going to be dangerous. We think they're going to be savages or whatever, right? We think they're going to be different or a different race, blah, 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 right? And then you come there and you find out they're just like you, right? They want to survive, right? They want to be friendly, right? They want things to be well. They just don't have the opportunity, okay? And, so and then within 15 minutes, we also had some of the adults talking to us. That was a very interesting conversation. But yeah, after a few minutes of talking to them, they said, okay, we like you. We make sure nobody kills you. Which is the polite version of,
that's
we'll let you live.
Yeah.
I said, hey, that's great, wonderful. And then we just started asking around, okay, what do you guys think? Like, what would help you? What would improve this environment? Because you're standing there and you're in the middle of nowhere. There's shacks that is put together with scrap, metal, pallets, bits of plastic, anything you can think of. No running water, no streets, just dirt roads, garbage all around, and some big companies illegally burning chemicals in the background and huge black smoke clouds, right? Because they can get away with it over there. So, and then you see kids picking in between rubbish, trying to find something, either to eat or that they can sell, right, in order to survive. So that's a little bit of a reality adjustment, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I had this moment of like, where do I even start, right? Where do I even start? Because this seems hopeless. So anyway, we started asking, what do you guys think you need? What do you feel would help you, right? And very interestingly, right, they didn't say money. They didn't say food, okay? They didn't say clothing. They said education, right? And again, big surprise to me, education. Okay, that's what we need. Okay, good. We'll start getting some materials and setting up some classes, right? So we stayed there and came back and forth and set up some literacy projects, and help them out. And wonderful time, fantastic. Got a lot of improvement, then had to leave, right? But now I had like gained a lot of additional knowledge, right? So I was ready to go somewhere else. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to India next, right? Because that's one of the other countries with large slums. And I went to Delhi and went to the inner city slums. And again, total eye-opener. You come in there, as long as the people get to know you and they find out you're there honestly to help and you don't look down on them, right? they become so open and friendly. So I started finding out, okay, what do you guys need? What would improve the situation, right? And again, they didn't say money. They didn't say food. They didn't say clothing. They said education, right? And this is one for one is the answer in poor, or less well-off areas. I find out that they are aware that they need education, just not being provided in the quantity and quality. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and I think just throughout history, it's proven that education is one of these fundamental human needs. People have died over the right to be educated.
absolutely.
And yeah, you're definitely providing something that they needed. They're telling you this is, obviously they're in areas that maybe they don't have the best shelter, maybe they don't have clothes, maybe they don't have the most food, but they're asking for education. That's something super important.
Exactly. And they know that that is the only way out for them into that's their one chance. If they can get educated, they can get out of the slum, right? If they cannot get educated, they will not make it out of the slum. Okay.
Yeah.
And you really touched something like education is a fundamental need, right? Yeah, it's also a basic human right. Okay. It's one of the basic human rights, the right to education. Right. But then you have to ask yourself the question, okay, what is education? Right. Because like a lot of kids in the West get educated, but end up knowing very little things or very few things, right? So what is education, and what should education achieve? Okay. And I think the first, when I ask people this, even teachers and professors, they're like, well, a diploma, so you can have a job. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably true, but that's not why you educate, right? Like education should be such that a child is enabled to pursue his dreams, right? And to achieve his goals. And if you start to take that viewpoint of like, why are we educating? Are we educating just because, it's good, or because society says you should, or so we can have a diploma and fit in with a job? No, now we're forcing something off what we think is correct, right? And I've talked to so many people who go, wow, if I could have just been educated on what I wanted,
right.
I would have been happy, right?
And William, I really want to interject here, and that just kind of struck a nerve with me too, because we go through the motions of education here. We're just like, well, let me get that diploma and everything will be fine, and then you come to find, well, I didn't really learn a damn thing, and here I am, and I'm expected now to, do even more, get into debt, and now I have to go to college and get a college degree, and that'll be the answer. And it's not, you're just kind of, again, going through the motions. Somebody else told you, hey, you need to do this. In my head, I was really always a little bit bitter, because I'm like, look, I took a while to get my college degree. It took a while because I had to work. I was one of these kids that, I grew up not the most well off or rich or anything. And as soon as I had to work, I was just working, but I really started to get a little bit bitter, because it's like, look, I cannot work all of you. I have more passion. I have more talent. And even those of you that have, like advanced degrees, I feel sometimes like those people can't even put together, a coherent paragraph. They don't know the difference between there, and there. They don't, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, you went and did all of this, you got educated, and for what? It didn't serve you, and I would, again, just be a little bit bitter about that, because like, I can outwork you. I have more passion than you. I have more drive, but that little piece of paper, is holding me back and hindering me. And you're right. I didn't get to choose what I wanted to learn in something like in the university. And it was kind of just like, well, here's a list of things. Just get through it. We'll give you your piece of paper, and your life will be great.
Right, exactly. I agree with you 100%, right? And I consider it, the modern serfdom or the modern slavery, and it's invisible, right? Uh, because what is slavery? It's being basically having to do what other people say, right?
Right.
Freedom is making your own choices, right? And so if you want to give somebody freedom, you have to give them a real education, something they can use, and something that allows them to pursue their goals. And at the bottom of that lies literacy. Okay, the ability to easily read and understand. Okay, and many people misdefine literacy as having read big books. Okay, no, that's what fools want you to believe, right? Literacy is the ability to easily read and understand what's on a page, right? Because if you can do that, you can study up on anything yourself, right? And you can pursue your dreams and you can pursue your goals, right? And this provides freedom. This provides the ability to move upwards, to train yourself, to become more educated, to get more skills. Okay, but it rests on the fundamental of literacy, and I'm going to repeat: literacy, reading with understanding. Okay, and so that's what we started focusing on, right? Because as you said, you go to the university, they're like, study this, remember this, take a test, we'll give you a piece of paper, right? And you're all good, except you're not, right? When I was in the slums of India, well, I must have met at least, 200 or 300 university graduates with master's degree or certificates, engineers that were selling potatoes at the side of the road because their certificate didn't do anything for them, and they hadn't been educated in the skills they needed to create survival or a job or get on with life. Okay, so people, universities train people to be employees, right? They don't train people to be entrepreneurs or independent, and they make very sure that that unless you have their diploma, you will never fit in, right? And that's a form of racism, right? Because, and then again, I'll go back to India. I've done educational seminars at the top boarding schools in India, and I've worked with with the kids in the top boarding schools in India, and I've worked in the slums, only to see, is there a difference between the children, right? No difference whatsoever. In actual fact, kids in the slums tend to learn faster, right? And kids who have gone to school for several years tend to have a harder time thinking because they've been forced to remember so many facts without understanding them, that they're lost. Okay. So another thing that I like to point out to people is, look, anything you don't understand, you have to work very hard at memorizing, right? But anything you don't, you do understand, you don't have to memorize. It's just somehow part of you. You work with it, right?
Right.
So if you educate towards understanding rather than memorization, everybody passes, right? You leave no child behind, right?
It's the ability to think critically, right? The ability to kind of, be on your toes and be able to formulate a thought as opposed to just regurgitating.
Exactly. And is this thought even useful, right? The amount of useless information taught in school that you're never going to use. Oh my God, right? Waste of time. You're wondering why kids are bored, right? That I know because I've done lots of lectures in universities as a guest speaker and spoken to the kids on human rights, on literacy, and all these things. And our standard image of a university classroom or of a classroom is kids sitting there bored, wishing they were somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
And I've been in education for quite a while. And even now in my career, I train adults to come into education, right? And something that kind of just it bothers me a little bit is that there's no they're not looking to comprehend things. They're looking to just kind of race to jot down all the notes, right? And so I noticed this even when I was going to college. People aren't listening. They're looking at the PowerPoint and they're copying every single note. It's like, hold on a minute, like just pause, listen. You don't have to be so busy trying to memorize things, right? It's not going to work, and it's just too much. You're front loading too much. You're never going to remember things verbatim. And even when I'm training people, I kind of stress like, hey, you don't need to sit there and just take notes. I'm not going to read off the PowerPoint. We're going to have conversations. We're going to have real life, anecdotal stories that you're going to understand. I'm going to speak to my experiences. You're going to speak to your experiences. That's how we learn, because again, people just want to just take it all in and act like that's education. It's not.
Exactly. We completely agree with you there, right? Like, don't take notes. If you're taking notes, I know you don't understand it, right? Because your need to take notes is based on non-comprehension. Now, doesn't mean you can't write a few notes here and there, or some important facts, right? But if it's everything, no, you're not. It's the evidence that comprehension isn't occurring. So
also the conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. How can you apply the information is more, right? And can you think of a few different ways, that you can apply this information? And when that's happening, okay, we know we're getting somewhere. But back to this point of literacy. So, I started a literacy project in the slums, right? And I worked with the kids every day, and I took all the existing school materials they had, and started to use them, and I found out all the kids were getting lost, right? But this is true in the West as well, right? What's passing rate these days? What, 40% and you pass, right? I mean, I know that in India they talk about this great, passing rate in their schools and colleges, right? Yeah, it's because the passing standard is 40%, right? Right. Well, if the passing standard, of a multiple choice test is 40%, you only need to know 10% of the information, right? Because you're going to get 30% just by randomly ticking off check boxes, on a multiple choice test, right? And if, so with a passing standard of 40%, you can get, a 70% passing rate in school, right? If you actually break down those numbers, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Right? That's horrifying, right? Because we now know people are not getting more than 10-15% of the information that's being of what's being relayed in school, right? Anyway, again, like, in the slums, I asked, what do you guys want? It was education and literacy. And specifically, they wanted to learn English better. And India is English speaking. I mean, it speaks 23 languages, right? But it's one of the official languages, and it does help them a lot. And especially kids in slums want to learn English because then they know they can get better jobs, okay, in the future. So it's not because I'm trying to enforce English on the world. It just happens to be what the kids want, by actual, survey. This is what they want. So, okay, I give the kids what they want, not what I think they need, right? So we found out that the existing English, all starts with a grammar book, right? Now, if you have no vocabulary or no words in a language, and you're handed a grammar book, how are you going to learn that language, right? It's impossible, because grammar is the fine-tuning of language, so education is completely backwards. It's the same when you go to English, schools in the US or England or in the West. If you're going to learn a foreign language, what's the first thing they do? They give you the grammar book of that foreign language. That's ridiculous, right? Because if you look at and if you just take a very critical view of like, how does a person learn a language? Well, mom and dad are the best teachers, in that aspect. They first teach them words, right?
Yeah.
And nobody is correcting their child's grammar at the age of 3, right?
Right. Yeah.
Nobody would think to do that, right? And nobody would think to hand a baby a grammar book, in order to learn their language, right? So yet when it comes to teaching somebody else a language, they're like, okay, well, let's start by pretending they already know everything and right, that they already speak the language and can read the language fluently, so that they can finish off their grammar in that language, right? You've set every kid up for failure, right? Except a few really tough, smart ones that can claw their way through this. So I scrapped all the existing school materials and we devised our own program, right? We simply looked at, what do mom and dad do in order to teach their children, right? Because mom and dad are always really successful, right?
Right.
They teach every child to speak, right? And to me, the fact that a person can speak a native language or their language, you already have the proof that that child is smart and that they can learn. I don't care what anybody else says. The evidence is right in front of me. He's speaking a language. That kid has brains, right?
Yeah.
So we start with a basic vocabulary with flashcards, right? And we just only spoken flashcards, like pictures, and teaching the words. After about 2 weeks, they have 100-word vocabulary, right? And then I make these illustrated booklets for literacy. And I call them Ollie the Elephant, because it's an elephant cartoon character. But I take the small words of the English language, right? Like words like the, is, on, to. And you have about 50 or 60 small words that make up 30 to 40% of any English sentence. Okay? But you take a word and, for instance, right? You have to know the 3 basic meanings of and if you want to be fluent. Okay? So we have 1 booklet for each meaning of and. For the word at, we have 5 booklets, right? 1 booklet for each of the meanings of at. First meaning of at shows place or position. I'm at home, I'm at the office, I'm at the movie theater. Who is at the door, right? At shows place or position. Next one, we go, okay, a booklet. And then there's 20 example pictures and sentences in each one of these booklets, right? So you easily understand. At shows time. Meet me at 6 o'clock, right? At is used to show time. That's your second meaning. 20 illustrated examples of at being used to show time, right? Third meaning of at, in the direction. Look at the wall, look at the sky, point at the dog, right? At shows direction. So again, and we cover each one of the basic meanings, because that builds fluency, because it isn't the big words that confuses people, right?
Right.
It's the small words, right? And that will determine whether you can fluently speak a language or not. I speak several other languages myself. some fluent and some not. The problem I have in the languages that are not fluent is I don't know which small word to use in order to give meaning to the sentence, right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting take. I never really thought of it that way, because you always think like someone with a vast vocabulary, that can that can score really high on like an SAT or something like that. Oh, they must be really smart. They must really get it, But really quickly, I know you covered a lot of ground there, but I want to just get a few little tidbits, right? Maybe just kind of like some and I know there's a lot to to dig into
Yeah.
there, but when it comes to education, right, there's a lot of things that are not working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there may be some better alternatives. Just really quickly, as far as like broad strokes, right? What are some things that would make Western education better right now?
Okay. Well, first of all, stop using the pre-World War One German education system, right? Because the existing education system in the West comes from Prussia, right? The Prussian Empire, and that education system was designed to make unthinking, unquestioning soldiers, right? And that's the model that was imported into England and the United States, right? And so we need to make people aware, like all these tests, where you have to memorize specific facts, where you have to give the right answer rather than demonstrate use or demonstrate comprehension. This originates, from pre-World War One Germany in order to create an unthinking militaristic empire, because that's what soldiers need to be. On the battlefield, you can't do a lot of thinking. You don't have time, right? And you start to think things over carefully, and you're dead, right? You just need to react. And if a hill has to be taken, okay, a few people are going to die. We don't want anybody to, that's the mentality of an army. Okay, so switch from memorization based to comprehension based. Okay, do you understand what you're reading? Do you understand what you're learning about? Can you use it? Right? And that would be the first one, major change that I think needs to be made. Second, focus on literacy, the ability to read easily and understand, right? Because that is what you need to get a job. That's what you need to do further studies to improve yourself in a job, right? That's what you need to create your own company, right? You need to be able to learn quickly. If you want to start your own activity, if you want to be independent. So comprehension based, then literacy, understanding what you read. And if you made only those two basic changes, I think everything would sort itself out, because people will start to think independently and for themselves. Okay? Because only when you do not understand something do you need somebody else's opinion. When you understand something yourself, you don't need somebody else's opinion or need somebody else to tell you what is right. You will know, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Again, there's so much to cover here, and I really quickly, before we even close out at some point, I wanted to talk about your charity.
Yes.
You have a charity that you started, right? With
Yes.
Was that with your wife, or is that
that's with my wife, CharityUnited.us. Really what we do is we work with other groups. We've done many different things, but we're definitely focused on education in slums and literacy at this point. I just actually came back from Ireland, where I spent 6 weeks training volunteers of other literacy or other groups in the community on how to improve the literacy in their environment, and how to use Ollie the Elephant literacy program, which we made in the slums. to help others, right? So that's kind of what we're focused on right now. It's just working with any other group, any other individuals, anybody that really wants to see improvement in their community, and is a fan of independent thinking, right?
Yeah.
And people making their own choices.
Yeah. That's definitely a good thing.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to throw out there, promote, advertise for people listening?
I will just leave it with a different message, right? It's like, look, sometimes it seems impossible to do anything about, to society, because so much bad news comes in, right? No, that's the news channel for you, go outside, speak to your neighbor, right? You can always do something, no matter how small, to improve your environment, right? And I learned this, helping refugees, because at times we would run out of supplies, okay? And it's 4 a.m. in the morning, and it's freezing cold, and you have nothing to help people with anymore, right? Well, I'd stand there and I'd listen to them, right? And I'd let them talk to me for 5 minutes, and I'd say, wow, I'm sorry, but, I understand, and I really wish you the best of luck, right? They would feel so much better, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes all you have to do to create a better environment is give somebody 5 minutes of time and really understand them, right? And it can make a world of difference, okay?
Yeah,
and so if you feel overwhelmed, help one person with something tiny, you will start to feel better yourself.
Yeah. Other than understanding and education, people want to be understood. There you go.
Exactly.
Is there where can people find you? Is there a website or social media where people can
CharityUnited.us is our website. If you're interested in the literacy program, I have a website called claritylearningcenters.com. That's with a British spelling, so it's TRES at the end. It's because I set it up in India. Right. Been traveling the world right now in Albania, last week in Ireland. But so that's where you can find more about all of the elephant literacy. Also, if you go to charityunited.us/gift, I have a little illustrated grammar booklet that is free download for anybody, any of your viewers. And that's just my gift to anybody, who wants to help a child or somebody understand grammar better. Okay. And it's fully illustrated, super easy, and it tends to blow people's mind, because I'm not coming from an academic perspective in that booklet, and coming from a perspective, how do you use language?
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely a good tool to have out there, right?
Absolutely.
But William, I really appreciate having you on. I think again, we just delved in a little tiny bit, barely dug our toes into the sand there. I know there's a lot to talk about, but I think it was a good conversation. People hopefully got something out of it. And then, hopefully we'll see those changes in education at some point.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And you do a fantastic job yourself. Keep at it. We need people like you.
All right. Thank you. And I appreciate you again. And for everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast, and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.